This is Art Babbitt before the strike, but I'm going to talk to you about his friendship with another significant Disney employee, Gunther Lessing, Vice President of Walt Disney Productions and Walt's attorney during the years that Babbitt was there. Here's a picture of a dinner party, probably in late 1939, early 1940. Left to right, we see Les Clark with his wife Mimi, Gunther Lessing, Art Babbitt and his wife Marge Belcher, all breaking bread together. Fast forward to 1974, Art Babbitt is roasted by the creme of the animation community. This is what the host, Chuck Jones, says in his opening remarks.
We are here tonight to talk about sweet old Babbitt, as some people call him, or sometimes just the initials. What can I say about Art Babbitt that Gunther Lessing didn't say better?
And Chuck Jones should know since he led the Warner Brothers unit of the Disney strike. As far as someone who stayed in during the strike, in a recently uncovered 9-page letter by Ward Kimball from 1976, he had this to say. When asked how he felt the strike settlement could have been sped up, he says, "By Gunther Lessing's early demise, he hated unions and brainwashed 50%. Walt, I think." It's funny that Ward says that because Babbitt said almost exactly the same thing in an interview in 1971.
And I think of all the lousy things that happened during the strike and afterwards, I would say that 50% of it was caused by outside influences, namely Gunther Lessing and a guy by the name of O'Rourke. He was the labor relations guy, you know.
Now, Gunther Lessing, here he is with Roy, Walt, and the president of RKO. He may not be as well known to us as some of the artists like Ward Kimball, Wooly Reitherman, or even Jack Kinney, but he was well known enough to them to be caricatured, though not in any of the films, but in the newsletter that was handed out during the strike every day. Here he is with Walt wearing a sombrero and covered in a swarm of garbage flies, always the silent crony, but always by Walt's side. But as we saw, Gunther Lessing used to have a friendly relationship with strike leader Art Babbitt. So I wanted to explore what turned this into this. I was able to piece the story together with some original documents in the CSU Oviatt Library, as well as the 1940s legal documents from the National Labor Relations Board, the LA Superior Court, and the U.S. Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. It all started in 1937 with a guy named Willie Byoff. Byoff was a member of Al Capone's gang. There's his mugshot. And he was also the head of the International Alliance of Theatrical and Stage Employees, or IATSE, a Hollywood union that had enlisted hundreds of machinists and projectionists from every major studio. By this time, it was already what Variety, the magazine, called an open secret that Byoff had blackmailed studio heads out of millions of dollars by threatening to pull his union men out on strike if the studio heads didn't grease his palm. So in September of 1937, word got out that he was going to make his way to the Disney studio. Art Babbitt wanted to stop this from happening, so he goes to Roy and asks what they should do. Roy points him to Gunther Lessing. And over the next few months, Lessing and Babbitt worked together to create what is essentially a company union called the Federation of Screen Cartoonists. By early February 1938, a message from Walt's desk to the Federation says, "The purposes of your organization appear to be laudable, and our attitude toward the problems confronting our employees are viewed with considerable sympathy." Great. And Art Babbitt is the president of the group. Notice that among the executive board members is Bill Roberts. Now, it takes a while, but by July 1939, the National Labor Relations Board in Washington, D.C., recognizes the Federation of Screen Cartoonists as the sole bargaining representative of the Disney employees. And Gunther Lessing represented the company in this hearing. So in October of 1939, the seats changed around a little bit. Babbitt is now vice president, and Bill Roberts is now president. And with the Federation as the legal representative of the employees, there's no room for Willie Byoff. So now that he's out of the picture, Babbitt and Roberts draw up a union contract on behalf of the Disney employees. The Federation representative submitted a proposed contract to management, but management was uncooperative and no agreement could be reached between the parties. So they drop it. and interest in the Federation gradually wanes to nothing. Exactly a year later, October 1940, Lessing calls Babbitt and Roberts into his office and informs them that the IATSE, that's Willie Byoff, had signed up members of the camera department and asked what the Federation was going to do about it. Bill Roberts replied that there's nothing they could do since no contract had been signed. Lessing urged the committee to revive interest in the Federation, but Roberts then suggested that the company could transfer the cameramen who had joined the IATSE to another department or to fire them. Lessing mulls this over, but Babbitt jumps in and immediately shows his militancy and independence with respect to labor organizations by angrily protesting that he would not be used as a stooge by the company, and that if the company would discriminate against the cameramen, he would personally sign up to the IATSE because, he says, if you are capable of pulling a trick like that on those men, you are capable of pulling a trick on any of us. In the end, the committee left Lessing's office with no action taken in reviving the Federation. Now, at this time, while the Federation of Screen Cartoonists had existed inside the Disney studios, an independent union outside the studio, the Screen Cartoon Guild, Local 852, was gaining momentum. The Screen Cartoon Guild, later the Screen Cartoonists Guild, was signing up artists from every Hollywood cartoon studio and was already the exclusive bargaining agent for the animators at MGM. They aimed to have a branch, or a unit, representing every animation studio. In February 1941, Babbitt was nominated for chairmanship of the Disney unit of the Screen Cartoon Guild. This nomination was announced in Variety. Lessing reads this in the paper and calls Babbitt into his office. He asks Babbitt if he was going to accept the nomination. Babbitt replied that he intended to. Lessing warned him that if so, Babbitt would be getting himself into trouble, and he advised Babbitt to be sick or to go away for a few days. And I love what comes next. Babbitt was thereafter elected chairman of the local. Just a couple weeks later, a scandal hits Lessing's desk in the form of a letter that he is CC'd on. It's from the Screen Cartoon Guild, and it's to the Painters District Council, which is chiefly significant because it's an incredibly well-connected union. In the letter, the Screen Cartoon Guild asks the council that Walt Disney products be placed on the official Unfair We Don't Patronize list. This would start a union-wide boycott, and to inform all affiliates and all international unions of its actions in this matter. This would start a worldwide boycott. The real icing on the cake, though, is that copies of this letter were sent to Lessing, to the president of RKO, to the studio manager of RKO, and to the top Hollywood union heads. So Lessing calls Babbitt into his office, and he asks, "Do you have anything to do with this boycott proposal?" Babbitt says he knew nothing about it. Lessing says, "You're the chairman of the union's Disney unit, and this is a proposal against Disney. How could they have moved forward without your say-so?" Babbitt still says, though, that he knows nothing about it. Lessing asks him to repeat this testimony to a room of Disney management later that day, and Babbitt tells the same thing, that he knew nothing about it. The next day, he tells a member of management that, in fact, he did have something to do with it. This starts a slew of antagonizing bulletins that appear on the studio walls, disparaging the Screen Cartoon Guild, as well as Babbitt specifically. Babbitt's and Lessing's relationship comes to an end when, at the end of May, one lunchtime, the chief of studio police hands Babbitt a letter from Lessing stating that he's fired. And of course, the next day was the strike. I'm going to leave the final word with Ward Kimball. When asked, was it really the studio's lawyer, Gunther Lessing, who encouraged Disney to fight the union so fiercely, Ward writes, yes, the leading culprit, the villain, the heavy. Well, the strike finally ends, and then World War II finally ends, and the studio has to hire Babbitt back. And he works there until he resigns in 1947. Here's his resignation acceptance letter. Dear Mr. Babbitt, we hereby accept your resignation from our employment effective as of January 16, 1947. And of all the people in Disney management who could have signed this very simple form letter, it was actually signed by Gunther Lessing. And that's just one bit of the Art Babbitt story.